All right, so we're going to get started here. So hello everyone who's here today. My name is Olivia Figuera, and I'm a senior computer science and engineering major at SCU, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. Today we're going to talk to you about research at SCU and the ways in which SCU is uniquely positioned in Silicon Valley with respect to STEM research. But before we start, I'd like to introduce the panelists, Sarah and Carla. So Sarah, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, like Olivia said, my name is Sarah. I am a senior studying bioengineering.
Hello everyone, my name is Carla. I am also a senior studying mechanical engineering and a double minor in chemistry and aerospace.
Awesome, thank you. So to give you all a brief overview of research in the School of Engineering at SCU, the school has several labs ranging across all disciplines researching and developing state-of-the-art technologies, and the faculty that lead these labs often receive grants from local companies, which is what makes SCU special since the tech industry is all around us here in the Bay Area. So grants and funding from such companies and organizations allow SU faculty to do more research and bring on more student researchers such as ourselves into their labs, including high school students in the summer. That's usually something that people do since there's so many people wanting to do STEM research in Silicon Valley. So that's what we're going to be discussing today is sort of the student experience with respect to STEM research at SU. And so we're going to go through a few questions that we've prepared, and then we'll open it up to the audience afterwards for questions. So hold on to your questions until the end of this first part. So the first question, and I guess we'll just go in the order of Sarah and then Carla. The first question is, how and when did you get involved in research?
I got involved in research my sophomore year at SCU. And basically, I just kind of looked at the professors online that were doing research and read some information about them and saw the kind of work that they were doing. And I ended up just sending one of them an email. I'd never met them before, had a class with them. And I just asked if we could set up a meeting so I could learn more about his research and what he does. And during the meeting, he offered me a spot on his research team. So it was really easy. I just had to reach out.
For me, it was kind of similar where I was in a class that was seminar based. So the professors throughout the department would come in and like talk about their research. And I was super interested in one of the professors when he was talking about his research. So I met up with him after the class and scheduled a time to come by his office and talk to him more. And after that, he offered me a position in his research lab, and I had the opportunity to get funding for his lab, and yeah, so that's where it started.
Awesome. For me, it was, I guess, a little bit different, but I was competing at a hackathon at SU. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a coding competition. And my team was presenting our project, and the professor was at the presentation part of the hackathon, and they said that could be a research project that you could actually continue developing after this hackathon. And so my team sort of got into that lab, and we started working on the project for the next year, and that's sort of how I got my first foot in research as well. And so our next question is, why did you want to do research in the first place?
I think so. I am more on the biomolecular side of engineering, and I think mostly in the field after graduation, a lot of the jobs are research based, and so I kind of always knew it was something that I wanted to get into and explore. So yeah, just the earlier start, the better.
So for me, actually my first research experience was in the Department of Chemistry. So I was working there, and it was, since it wasn't like my main major, I was mainly using research as a way to like explore my minors, explore something that was interesting to me, and see if that was, I could see myself like doing that like in my future career. So yeah, I basically used my chemistry research as a way to like explore my passions, and it actually had a laid a foundation for research experience, so that way I could actually pursue research in other ways that I found myself really interested in.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess for me, it kind of came out of nowhere because the professor just asked us if we'd want to do that project as a research project. But it was really interesting because I guess the interesting thing about research is like you're sort of exploring new territory with whatever field that you're in. And I think it's really exciting just to know that for our project specifically, it was something that we just thought about during the hackathon, and all of a sudden it could become a reality. It could become a real thing that we were actually putting it out into the world. And so I think that's probably what got me really like, that's why I said yes to the opportunity in the very beginning, because I was like, that's exciting. We could make this, this project a reality. We can actually apply our skills beyond just this competition. And that's sort of interesting for all the folks here who have gone to hackathons or maybe are thinking about going to them, because there are ones for high schoolers as well. That's something that's really interesting, is that these projects can become real. They can go beyond just the hackathon competition, if you're in computing at all or interested in that. But that really was exciting for me because it shows just how research isn't just academia and just inside of the school and that's it. It actually goes beyond that, and there's a lot of opportunities to actually apply whatever you're researching and developing, especially in STEM. Like, it's so up and coming, and it's so widespread in our just world. STEM is so important that your research projects can become a reality. So with that, our next question is, what are your specific research interests?
I would say my research interests are protein and tissue engineering, especially that's kind of what I'm working on right now. But my favorite classes that I've taken are physiology and immunology. So in the future, I would love to do some research surrounding that. And I think my absolute dream research project would be physiopathology in the GI tract.
So like I kind of mentioned earlier, I started doing research in the chemistry department, specifically in microfluidics. So I was developing kind of like a prototype of how to make like a lab on a chip. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but so I was basically spearheading that, and that was really fun, but it really opened my eyes to see what like research can actually do to like lead you in the right direction for your career. So I from that research, I ended up applying to do different research with a different professor. So which leads me to where I'm currently researching in aerospace engineering. So my project is currently developing a mission to Mars, and kind of like doing a systems engineering perspective to it. So like planning out, excuse me, planning out like what's going to happen and how we're going to do that. So it's really interesting, and seeing how like everything comes together is really, really cool. And it's probably my favorite part of doing research.
Yeah, so for me, I've sort of jumped around a few research topics, I guess, in my past 4 years as a college student. But in the beginning, right when the hackathon sort of thing happened, I was working on more of a humanitarian engineering project. And then after that, I started taking more courses, more up division courses. As usually how it goes is, as you learn and you take more of these courses that are actually applications of your field in STEM or engineering specifically, you sort of learn more about what is actually happening in that field. Whereas, as a first year, you're taking a lot of math and physics and stuff like that. But anyway, I started taking more courses, and I got really interested in cybersecurity, and also social computing research, sort of the intersection of those two. So basically, any security and privacy of user-facing technologies, such as social media, which I know probably everyone here uses or has seen. Any internet system, such as Zoom, is an example of that. And that's sort of what I'm really interested in now, and I'm planning to do more of that after SU. That sort of leads us into our next question, which is sort of to elaborate on the research projects that you've done, maybe what the labs and groups that you've worked in at SUR.
So my sophomore year, I first started out in the Zeng lab in bioengineering. And so my first project, I was just kind of shadowing a senior design project that it was essentially creating a new type of treatment for MRSA. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it's basically drug-resistant bacteria. And so instead of using An antibiotic, it would be an anti-infectant, so wouldn't allow the bacteria, like the bacteria would still be there and it wouldn't kill them, but it wouldn't allow them to kind of bind and hurt us. So that was a really interesting project to shadow. And then my junior year, I started on a new project, which is the one I'm still currently working on, and it's a protein ligation project. So mainly, we're just trying to create a new method for proteins to bind together and to create proteins within the body. And so this has potential applications in drug development, which is really exciting. And then another research project I've worked on has been in industry. It was at a manufacturing company up in Richmond. So we were making pharmaceuticals, and I was mostly working on process development. So that's more refining the process of manufacturing and making sure everything is as efficient as possible.
So for my first research project was creating a prototype for a microfluidics lab. So for those of you guys who don't know what microfluidics is, it's basically like the study of small liquids flowing. And so our lab was doing some fancy research on trying to develop certain ways on how to sort cancer cells. And my role in that lab was kind of to simplify our research and kind of put it on a smaller scale prototype that makes it more accessible to the students to learn how to use. So I ended up creating like an education module to showcase like the kind of work our research lab was doing. And I was able to go and actually conduct a whole class doing my little module that I worked on, which was really fun because I was actually able to like see my work come to action and like see it actually implemented in like a real classroom. So that was really cool. And then so that was my sophomore year. And as a junior and currently now as a senior, I'm working on that Mars missions that I mentioned earlier. So what makes this Mars mission like really cool is that we're developing technology to replace a rover. So currently all the recent Mars missions have had a rover, but what makes my project different in that is that we're trying to use a completely UAV powered payload to kind of replace a rover. So I'm doing a lot of research right now with like helicopter technology and researching the parameters and like limitations of how far we can travel it and how high we can travel it, because the conditions on Mars are so much different than that on Earth. And it's really hard to simulate that because the density is a lot lower. So you need more power to generate lift on helicopters. And so weight is a really big restriction to the project. So it's really interesting to see this project progress for me because I'm taking all the concepts that you've learned in class and what you've seen like be a reality in like previous I guess Mars missions, and yeah, so that's really cool for me.
Wow, super exciting. So for me, kind of similar I mentioned before, I was doing more humanitarian engineering in the beginning. In my sophomore and junior year, I worked in the Frugal Innovation Hub, which is a group, multidisciplinary group at Santa Clara that focuses on working on frugal solutions using technology. And so we were working to create an application to teach rural Ugandan children and teenagers about health issues and misconceptions related to health. And so this was more of like a humanitarian engineering and like human computer interaction, which is just a really broad area that basically just means how do we interact with technology and how can we create technologies that are better for us to interact with. And so that was that project. And we worked with a local organization called Rose Academies, which is actually just like across the street from SCU. And they're an organization that works with local Ugandan organizations that do the same thing, that try to get these technologies into the hands of these people to actually try to use these frugal technologies to help them and try to solve some type of issue that they're facing. And so then from there, I started doing more summer research internships between my junior and senior year and sophomore and junior year as well, where I focused more on the human computer interaction, but then moving more towards cybersecurity. And so one of my projects was working on how if and how social network users can determine if a given social media profile is fake. And so the reason that's important is because a lot of social media profiles nowadays are created by, fraudulent users, attackers who are trying to steal your information or do something to attack you or something. You might have seen some weird bot looking profiles on Facebook or something like that. And so those are usually created with like machine learning technologies. And so this study was to figure out, can people actually determine if those are fake? What are the clues that tell us that a social media profile is fake? And that can help inform us about what are the ways that we can protect users? Can we figure out a way for the actual platform to warn you about these different things? And so that's sort of the intersection of like human computer interaction with cybersecurity. And so that's sort of the area that I'm trying to move on into the future. And so that's sort of what I've been doing. And also currently for my senior design project, so senior design at SU is basically our senior capstone or thesis project. All engineers do it. And I'm working on it, also social media project, but we're looking at COVID-19 health messaging, public health messaging from governors in the US, how they have impacted people's I guess their public sentiment towards these different, policies and legislations, and determining how that has compared to the COVID-19 cases and deaths and that trajectory throughout the last year. And so that's more on the social computing side of things. But as you can see, this is all these different topics that we've been talking about. You might think engineering research, it sounds so, like hard and far away, especially as a high schooler. Like when I was in high school, I didn't really know about this sort of stuff, but this research is very real. It's very stuff that we work on. It's stuff that we deal with, like social media, or whether it's, Mars missions. Like we hear about this stuff and we never think that could be me working on that, like in college, right, as a researcher. And so that's all to say that there's so many opportunities at SCU for STEM research just because of where we are located. There's so much funding, and we have compiled sort of all this information, especially the specific opportunities at SCU, in a slide deck that will be sent to you in the chat. It's a link. And so you can check those slides out after, but it's basically going through all the different funding resources that we have at Santa Clara, how to find out what other projects exist at Santa Clara, and also, what faculty have received funding from what companies. It's sort of fun to see how, how much funding we actually do get and how all three of us have been supported in that way, just because the funding is what allows us to do this awesome research at Santa Clara. And so with that, we're going to open it up to questions in the chat. And so let me just open that up. All right, I see one question. Is it a very competitive process to apply for a research position? And so I'll just open it up to Sarah and Carla if they want to answer.
Yeah, so if anyone missed it before, I'll just kind of talk about how I got started again. So my sophomore year, I literally just cold emailed a professor that I'd never met or had a class with, and asked if we could meet to discuss his research. And during that meeting, he offered me a spot in his lab. So no, it's not super competitive. It does depend on the department and the professor and what openings they currently have, but typically it's not too competitive. And if you want to find a spot in research, there's one open for you.
Yeah, going off of what Sarah said, because SCU has like such small class sizes, all the professors are like super interested in trying to get you involved in learning. And so I feel like they're always going to try to make room for you if you're interested in their research. But I guess the competitive part about research could probably be like the funding involved, especially if that's something you're interested in. I know for me, that process was kind of competitive. I don't know, I spent a long time like on my research, on my application to get into like fellowships and like scholarships. can be a little intense, but the professors are always there to try to help you out. And in the end, there was always a way for me to get funding. So that's a plus for SUU researchers.
Yeah, I would say also just to add to that, there's kind of two ways I would see that the research can be done. Either you're doing it, with a grant that your professor and you are working on, or such as what Carla mentioned, or summer funding so that you're able to, do this work in the summer, but or fellowships, that are separate from that during the academic year or during the summer. But there's also, you can basically just be doing research during the academic year and getting credits in terms of your like you get credits for taking classes, you can get credits for doing research as well. And that is sort of separate. And that I would say is the less competitive option because they do want researchers, they do want students to be helping them with whatever project they're doing. And they love to see us, be excited and be motivated. So that's, I've sort of experienced both of those. And I would say, agree that it's not competitive in that sense, but for the fellowships, it can be just because there is money involved. So the next question is, what is your experience balancing the workload between schoolwork and research?
Um, it depends on the week. I would say, especially for me, I'm life science research, so we rely on living cells, which kind of have their own mind and their own schedule. And so I have been in the lab at like 2 in the morning before, or at 6 in the morning. Like it's just you got to be there at a certain time some days. So some days or weeks it's really light, and maybe I'm only in the lab like for an hour 3 times a week. And then some weeks it's not kind of on a time crunch and you need to run certain experiments. So some days I'll be in the lab for like 8 hours one day and then 3 hours the next day, and you have to be in back to back. It really depends. But that being said, you can kind of control what week the heavy weeks fall on. So you can kind of make sure that that doesn't happen during a midterm week or something important. And yeah, it's just like with any other extracurricular. If it's really important to you, there's always ways to figure out how to balance it. And I know my PI especially is really understanding. He says grades are first. So if you ever feel like you need to take a step back, then that's totally understood.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like hours are super flexible because it's something that you're doing, I guess, voluntarily, I guess, if you're not getting paid for that. But like, if you are getting paid, then there's a certain amount of hours, I guess, that you do work if it's like a fellowship, as opposed if it's like grant based. Because I know grant based, I think it's an hourly pay, while a fellowship is more of like a stipend, I think, or at least based on my experience. So I guess finding the balance between like school and like research is definitely depends on like each person. I know for me, I probably spend about like 6 hours doing research a week, like on a good week. I don't know, but yeah, what was the other thing? It also depends on if you like are doing research as like a class that you signed up for, because at that point it's you signed up for the class for a certain amount of units, and each unit is like 2 or 3 hours a week that you are committed to work. So yeah, it's depending on a whole lot of different factors, but in the end it's totally up to you and what you think you can handle.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think the most important point is if you're interested in it and you're excited by the research, there's ways to make it work. And from my experience, I think also the other two folks in this panel is that we do research in addition to other extracurriculars as well. So research isn't like the only thing we do also. So that's just to say that research is sort of part of the picture, but it's definitely not like all that I do outside of my schoolwork. So it can work. You can make it work. You can make the balance work for you if you're interested in that. And I think there's a question later that kind of connects to this. So I just wanted to jump to that one real quick, but it's how many hours do you do research during regular school year and during summer? So I think we kind of answered that a little bit, but I would say during the school year, it's really up to it's kind of based on, your actual schoolwork schedule, other extracurriculars, that sort of thing that we just mentioned. But during the summer, for my experience, is basically like a full-time like commitment, like 40 hours a week is what I have experienced. But that can also change based on what the actual summer program is, and whatever the professor is doing as well. For me, it was sort of like 10 weeks of like 40 hours a week, and it was like a job, and I was being compensated. So that's my experience with that. But I guess if Sarah or Carla would want to add, go ahead.
Go ahead, Carla.
Yeah, my experience was very similar. During the summer, it's basically full time, so it's kind of like an internship. You clock in at 8 and you clock out at 5. But yeah, but yeah, during the school year, it really depends, like per week and per load. I know for me, like I was for my first few years at Santa Clara, I was overloading quite a bit. So my research time that I could commit was probably a little bit lower than average. But as I got a little more comfortable and as my like workload or school load got smaller, I was able to like balance the two out more, which was nice.
Cool. Awesome. And so the next question is, in which year of college would you recommend to start getting involved with research? So I can go ahead and start with this one. I think it kind of depends on the major, but I would say as soon as you want to try, go ahead. Like there's nothing stopping you from emailing your professor and just saying like, what are you working on? I'm really interested in XYZ. Like, do you have any space in your lab? That kind of thing. The reason I would say sometimes it depends on the year is just because some projects do require more like upper division, I guess, experience in terms of classes that you've taken. Sometimes you're really applying what you've learned in like a course you'll take in your junior or senior year in your research, but I don't think that means that freshmen can't. Like that's totally freshmen can definitely be a part of research. There's always opportunities to be, gain experience in a lab and just learn about what research is, reading papers, helping out in the lab in any way that they need. So I would just say, as soon as you think you're interested and ready to do it, just go ahead and reach out and ask a professor and see if they have any space in their lab. And just in the interest of time, our last question is, are research opportunities only offered based on your major, or can anyone partake in that field of research? And I guess it depends on the project, because some projects are very much specific to that discipline. For example, as a computer science and engineering, I have no idea about BioE, so I wouldn't really feel comfortable being in a research project that like Sarah is probably working on. But there are definitely multidisciplinary projects at Santa Clara and many other colleges as well. But there are different projects that sort of utilize expertise from all these different areas. And I've really only worked in more computer science engineering, but if Carla or Sarah has any experience with that, like go ahead and add to that.
I've pretty much only done it in BioE, but I know that you can be any major and do pretty much any type of research, especially if you've an interest in it. That means maybe if you're not that major, you're doing a little bit more outside research to kind of read textbooks and papers and figure out what's going on, but you can pretty much do whatever you're interested in.
Yeah, for me, it was, I guess, because I was kind of into like the chemistry and also like mechanical engineering. The work that I was doing was sort of like interdisciplinary. So I was in like a research lab that had a lot of people that were, chemistry majors, biochemistry, and then there was me and another person that were both in the engineering school. So I guess professors kind of do like to have different kinds of like people from different majors. Like it's definitely not restricted at all. It really depends on like your willingness to learn and like I guess explore your horizons and not just be like confined looking into like one box.
Awesome. Yeah. And so I think there are a few more questions in the chat, but I know that it is past 12:30. So Ricky, is it okay if we answer the last two? Let's see. Okay, so for those of you who have questions, you're free to stay and we can answer those. But for the general sort of event timing, thank you so much for coming, and we hope we were able to answer your questions. The link that Ricky sent in the chat earlier has a link to be able to contact us if you have any questions. So go ahead and do that if you have any lingering questions after this panel or if you have to leave. But thank you so much for coming. We'll answer the other questions for those who still have some. And if you want to stick around, that's okay. So Thank you so much. We'll answer the last two questions. So one of them is, do male students also do research? Yes. This panel is not indicative of the distribution of genders that do research at Santa Clara. It's very widespread. Everyone can do it. It's open to everyone. This is just who's available for our panel today. And so another question is, what is your experience having two minors while majoring in mechanical engineering, since I have heard it is a time demanding major? So that's for Carla. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess for me, it was when I was a freshman coming into Santa Clara, my main goal was like, I really wanted to be a chemical engineer. So I was actually a double major with mechanical engineering and chemistry. And so I guess that was why I was like, one of the reasons why I was so overloaded with classes at the beginning, because I was trying to like get the two done. But they're in different colleges. So it was like really, I guess, time consuming because none of the courses interlapped at all. So I was basically doing like two separate majors. Um, so yeah, that was really rough. But then once I started doing more like chemistry research, I started to realize that um, doing purely chemistry was not the goal I could see myself in. Like what I really wanted to do after college, like I knew chemistry was not it. So once I realized that, I started to explore other options in the mechanical engineering department. And I was really involved in the Maker Lab. I was vice president at one point, and um, I was doing a lot of like hands-on projects, and I realized that's what I really like to do. And so that's when I made the shift from like the chemistry department to like the mechanical engineering department and started getting like a lot more following, I guess, my interest and what I liked to do and the classes that I liked. And so I started to talk to professors more, go to their office hours, and see if they had like any advice for me to help pursue my passions. And I guess that's what led me to pursue aerospace.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm not a mechanical engineer, but I also have two minors, one in math, one in economics. And those are kind of, economics is pretty different from my major. But I would say, in terms of the time commitment, engineering, yes, is demanding like any of the engineering majors will be demanding. But I think it's kind of similar to the research. Like if you're interested in having a minor or a double major or something like that, we're doing research, like we've said, you'll be able to make time for it. And it's just about, time management and your motivation to want to do the extra work that it takes to do that and learn more. So it's very doable. People have done double majors in like music and an engineering major. Music is one of the also like has a lot of classes, and it doesn't overlap with anything in engineering, but people have done it. So it's very doable. So I don't think there are any more questions, but like I said, you can go ahead and refer your questions to the email that's in the slides at the very last page. But thank you so much for coming, and we hope that you were able to learn a little bit about STEM research at SU. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.